So my good friend David Zink, and of course president of the Norton Buffalo Hall Guilds. There we go, Paradise Guilds. You should, she knows more. Called me up a couple hours ago and asked me to do this, so I thought, I mean, I have a few songs about Paradise, so one fairly old, and then the other one that's just right after the fire. So I think Susan and I will try to do this.
And we have to say how honored we are to be opening up for Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s presentation. So it's nice to have you all here.
Yes.
And I know
yes,
a lot,
yes.
I know, yeah.
You know, and also, I want to, you know, devote these songs to, and there are a lot of people who were affected by this fire. But I was just thinking about it today, how lucky, how fortunate I was that Susan and I got out of there. I had, somehow during the middle of it, I had the ability to grab most of my recording studio, most of my instruments, most everything that was really, really precious to me. And most of my musicians friends who live in Paradise lost everything. A friend of mine, 8 guitars worth thousands of dollars. He did the right thing. He packed up his truck. He hooked up his beloved boat. You know, he grabbed his dog. I mean, his boat to this great, beautiful Toyota Tundra, you know, and got everything ready. And he could not get out. He could not get out, and he had to grab his dog and run. And everything gone. But, you know, that's a story of a lot of people up there, a lot of musicians. They lost everything. So I feel very grateful, and my heart sings for them.
There are miracles around my life. Only I will open my eyes. Take the time to truly see what is here outside of me. A light upon my shoulder rests, as if to lead me on this quest. Around me, so astound me, I'm here to see it all. Oh, I'm living in paradise every day. Oh, I'm living in paradise. Open my eyes and there's only blue skies. Oh, I'm living in paradise every day. Oh, I'm living in paradise. Open my eyes and there's only blue skies. Blue skies. Wake each day, praise the sun, count your blessings one by one. Find peace in every day that's done, 'cause no one knows if tomorrow will come. I see the light upon my shoulder rest, as if to lead me on this quest. Around me, so astound me, I'm here to see it all. Oh, I'm living in paradise every day. Oh, I'm living in paradise. Open my eyes and there's only blue skies. Oh, I'm living in paradise. Oh, I'm living in paradise. My eyes and there's only blue skies. Blue skies. Blue sky.
We will be again. We will be again. I'm gonna go off stage.
Okay.
That's okay?
Yeah.
John-Michael wrote this song soon after the fire. And actually, the first song he wrote was kind of a bummer, so he wrote this one instead.
And although it was an appropriate song, it was a bummer. And I mean, the first song was important. I mean, there's tragedies, and I was writing about stories of what happened to other people and stuff like that. But I realized after singing a lot, it wasn't really that was like the beginning of the story. But I really wanted to write a song about how I feel, how I felt about when I go home. You know, what my home is to me. So anyway, this is called Paradise, California. Well, I had me a garden, and everything I grew there kept me thinking I'm okay. Here in my easy chair, I finally had me some roses that weren't eaten by deer. It was a good life, but now I cry me a tear. I mean, I'm a refugee, and I want to go home. Yeah, I'm a refugee, and I want to go home. Yeah, I'm a refugee, and I want to go home. Yeah, I'm a refugee, and I want to go home. There was a fire on the mountain top. It burned everything up. Our sweet life up in ashes. We're starting over, you and me. No, we ain't got a clue where to go, what to do. But I know we'll be fine between the laughing and the crying. But now we're refugees, and we want to go home. Yeah, we're refugees, and we want to go home. Yeah, we're refugees, and we want to go home. Yeah, we're refugees, and we want to go home. I used to turn into my driveway, stare up at the pines. It was just like praying to something divine. There was a light on the front porch, always smiling at me. And Susie in the kitchen, cooking up a feast. But now we're refugees, and we want to go home. Yeah, we're refugees,
And we wanna go home. Yeah, we're refugees. And we wanna go home. Yeah, we're refugees. And we wanna go home. Oh, I had me a garden once, and everything I grew there kept me thinking I'm okay in the easy chair. Thank you. Thank you very much.
One of the things we also do as a guild is we do legislative work. And we're a grassroots organization, so ideas for legislative policy comes from the grassroots up. Our members tell us in Sacramento what they want us to work on. And this is one of the reasons why we asked Baum Hedlund to get involved and come and tell our members about how they can help us, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Bobby has been such a supporter of our organization, and we have been able to join him in a lot of the causes we share in common, like opposition to mandatory vaccines, glyphosate. Bobby came as our spokesperson and met with us at the governor's office in Sacramento on a program, yes, on a program we are still working on to this day, and that is to get Roundup, glyphosate, out of public schools and public property in California. And we actually have some legislators that are bold enough to support us on that, so we're moving forward on that. There's not much that I can say about Mr. Kennedy that many of us don't already know. These are your friends, Bobby. This is your crowd. So I'd like to introduce a wonderful activist, a wonderful environmentalist, and a consumer advocate, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Bob. Please excuse my voice. I used to have a very strong voice. I was 42 years old, and then I got hit by a disease, a neurological disease called spasmodic dystonia, and it gives my voice this kind of Catherine Hepburn crackle or whatever you call it. But anyway, it's painful. It's painful to talk, but it's more painful to listen to me. Usually it gets better when I talk for a little while, so I hope that happens. Some days it's actually pretty good, and some days it's been worse. But you know, I got married. I married an actress called Cheryl Hines, who has a show called Her Enthusiasm, which some people here have seen. And I moved to California 5 years ago. We moved to Malibu. She kind of sucked me in by saying we could live in Malibu. It was one of those campaign promises. And then last year, she got a job directing a big movie, and said, I can't do this commute anymore, so we moved into town. The community that my sister lives in, and that community was right in the epicenter of the Woolsey Fire. And the Woolsey Fire was really bad because it started on a toxic waste site. It started on the Santa Susana Rocketdyne Laboratory, which was the site of the worst nuclear disaster in American history. There was more in 1959. I don't know if you guys know this, but there was Boeing had a nuclear disaster out there where there was a complete meltdown of a reactor, an experimental reactor, and it released 240 times the radiation that was released from 3 Mile Island. It's by far the worst nuclear disaster in American history, and they hit 2 more in the 60s, and the Atomic Energy Commission and DOE kept them secret for 20 years. People in Calabasas began getting terribly sick from leukemia, children in these clusters, these very rare leukemias. And finally, it all came out a couple of years ago, and Boeing signed a $30 million settlement with 130 people who had leukemia, but it was sealed. The public never got to see it. But on that site, it's 2,800 acres. There's an average of 18 tons of toxic waste per acre. Really ugly stuff. That was where they were testing all the military missiles. They had 10,000 missile tests there. And that's where the fire started, and that entire place burned. And they've never done a cleanup. So all that toxic waste was incinerated and dropped down on Malibu. And my house that I had lived in it was not burned, but it was destroyed. All the houses near my sisters were destroyed. And my sister's unlivable now. So she lived at my house with her goats and her 4 dogs. And I just had puppies with my dogs. So we had like 19 dogs in the house. And the goats and my sister and her kids. But all of my friends many of my friends are from Malibu, and they're now refugees. And one of them, who's a famous actor, actually Gerard Butler, said to me, he came to me and he was asking me about lawsuits. And he said, you know, I'm not inclined to do lawsuits because I feel like this is an act of God. And I said, it wasn't an act of God. It was the Southern California Edison Company, because they didn't, you know, they had a line running through there, and the same thing happened as here. They hadn't sent linemen out to inspect the line for years. They knew, in fact, they told the PUC that they had insulated the jump wires, and they hadn't. And one of the jump wires in a 40-knot wind, which they know they're going to get there, hit the stabilizing cable, which is a guide wire coming down from the top of the line, and it sparked, and it's a 40-mile-an-hour wind, so the whole place lit up, and the first place to go was that entire toxic waste site. Now, by the way, just telling you this, a footnote, Boeing has so much of a, you know, the Toxic Substance Control Agency here in California is essentially a wholly owned subsidiary of the Boeing company. And Boeing was supposed to have it all cleaned by 2017, but they didn't clean it. Instead, they got another 35 years to clean it, and they said, we're going to do phytoremediation, which I've never heard of before. And I've been doing this in this space for 35 years. Phytoremediation this was to keep all the nuclear radionuclides from going down onto Calabat, onto Chatsworth and Simi Valley. They said, we're going to grow trees on the site, and they will absorb all of the dioxin and the polyaromatic hydrocarbons and the plutonium and the strontium and the tritium and all that, and they'll get locked into trees, and everybody will be safe. We'll put a chain around it. Well, all those trees went up in smoke, and they superheated the ground, and there's 18 tons of toxic, witch's brew of toxic goop on every acre. All that stuff burned. So anyway, the people there have a lot to worry about, because now they don't even know if they're safe going back to their homes to rebuild. And, you know, and I said to Gerard Butler, I said, look, for 35 years, I've been trying to make free market capitalism work in this country by forcing actors in the marketplace to pay the true cost of bringing their products to market. That includes cleaning up your mess, which is a lesson we were all supposed to learn in kindergarten. If you're going to be functioning in free market, and particularly if you are a government-sanctioned monopoly with 16 million forced paying customers, you know, that you're given as a gift, and with the power of eminent domain to condemn people's private property and go across it with your lines, and all these other bells and whistles that you get if you're Southern California Edison or PG&E. And by the way, PG&E I've worked with them on decarbonization and building, you know, clean energy plants and these kind of things. And there's a lot of good people who work for that company. I'm not saying it's an evil company. But what I'm saying is that this blaze was purposeful. It wasn't purposeful in that there were not people who got together and said, let's burn paradise. What they said is, we know we're an arson company because we have 70,000 miles of lines. Some of them are 100 years old, and we're not going to bother to inspect whether those century-old lines are robust enough, or the infrastructure is robust enough to hold them up. And by the way, 2012, 6 years ago, we have 5 entire latticework transmission towers fall to the ground in a winter storm, and we waited till 2016 to put them back up again. We didn't bother to look at the ones on either side of them to see if the same thing might happen to them. That's negligence. That means they knew it was going to happen again. They didn't know it was going to happen in Paradise. It's just, it was Paradise's turn to burn, as far as they're concerned. They know this is going to happen every year until they spend the money that they need to spend inspecting that infrastructure. This is a company and it has 20,000 people working for it. There's hundreds of lawyers whose job it is to make sure that every year they can get rate raises. And they have lots of people focusing on this because that's what they're focused on. If they focus just a tiny fraction of their corporate energy on inspecting their current lines that they spend on getting new ones and on getting rate raises, Paradise would still be there today. And I was up at Paradise. I saw, I've seen the devastation in Malibu, my home. This looks like a war zone. My father took me to Europe after World War II, and it looks like things that, I saw that, 9 years after World War II, but it looks like stuff that I saw there when I was a little boy. If a foreign nation did that to an American community, we would consider it an act of war. And, the fact that it's a favored corporation does not excuse them from the liability. And what I said to Gerard was, I said, look, it's your duty to participate in this stuff, because if you don't, these companies have no incentive to do a better job next time. If, when we tried the Monsanto case last summer, we got Bob Hedlund, which is the firm that I'm working with here. One of the things that my colleague, Brett Wisner, said to the jury, he said, we need you to give a big verdict in this case. We got a $289 million verdict. He said, if you give me, we asked for a $300 million verdict. They gave us $289 million. We said, if you give us a $300 million verdict, and he pointed to the defense counsel, to Monsanto's in-house lawyer, and he said, she has the CEO of Monsanto on speed dial. And when you come back here with that $300 million verdict, she's going to press that button. And that guy is sitting in his office waiting for the call. And when he gets it, the first thing he's going to say is, we got to change the way that we do business. And you got to give me a big enough verdict so that the CEO of this company will say, I'm never going to let this happen again. And any CEO who does let it happen knows that they're going to lose their job. They can't just skate through a fire in Paradise and everybody keeps their jobs. The only way they lose their jobs is if the shareholders get pissed. The only reason the shareholders are going to get pissed is if they have a huge verdict that makes them pay for the mess that they made in Paradise. So, and that's what I said to Gerard. I don't know what he's going to do, but I think people have a responsibility to participate in our democracy. And I love this community. I love the Guild. As Bob said, I've been involved with the Guild for many, many years. But I love the sense of community that you have up here, and I love the music that you gave us. Thank you for that. It was just beautiful. I was just sitting there amazed about how you wrote it and sang it, and how great it was. And it's kind of uniquely, Northern California. Really great, and I love that. And I do feel like, you are my people, and that when I come up here, I love it. I love the community, the sense of community that everybody has up here. And the progressive values and the optimism and the idealism and that sense of freedom and creativity that are kind of the emblems of this whole region. And that's why it makes it particularly criminal what they destroyed up there. And I look at that, I look at Paradise, I know it's important for us to have hope, but the devastation is so complete. I mean, I was walking through the rubble with a family called Manson and another guy, I think, called Bill Turner, who owned antique shops right at the beginning of town at that cross section. What was his name? Rick Mann. Do you know what the name of the other guy is who owns the one right next door? I think his name was Bill Turner, but he and his wife were going through and there's the skeletons of like bird cages and chandeliers and a beautiful metal Christmas tree, intricately made handmade metal Christmas tree, and this is stuff that their family has lovingly collected for decades. And how do you rebuild something like that? It's like the history of the community is in that shop. And it's not something you can go on the internet and buy a bunch of stuff and start selling it there. That stuff was lovingly chosen and cultivated, and it was probably a business with tiny margins, but they had figured out how to make it work. But how to start it from scratch, I don't know. I don't know how you build a community where the water lines are destroyed and the sewer lines are destroyed and the infrastructure is destroyed. But I can tell you this, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that community gets rebuilt. And it's going to start by making Pacific Gas and Electric pay the full bill for what they did. So, and that's what I've been doing for 35 years. I started out as an attorney for a small group of fishermen on the Hudson River, and brought over 500 cases, made polluters on the Hudson spend $5.5 billion remediating. Today, the Hudson is the richest waterway in the North Atlantic. The miraculous resurrection of the Hudson has inspired river keepers now, water keepers on 350 waterways around the planet. But I spent 25 years of my career bringing statutory cases, meaning Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, RCRA, CERCLA, environmental statutes, and on those, usually the penalty is a maximum of about $30,000 a day and injunctive relief. And, we won a lot of cases, but we didn't really change corporate culture anywhere. And then somebody asked me, a friend of mine asked me to come try a case in West Virginia, a jury trial against DuPont, which I sued DuPont a lot before statutory. This was a tort case where they had been operating a lead smelter. And I did a closing argument and won $533 million. It was the biggest judgment in the history of West Virginia. And that's when I said, wait a minute, this is a better way to do things. Because they're going to know about me in Wilmington because of this verdict. And so then I started doing more in these cases. I did the Monsanto case. I did a bunch of fire cases up in wine country, and there were 60 fires there. 18 people died, and 16 of those fires were caused by Pacific Gas and Electric. So I started looking at the company then. I saw that they'd gone to the PUC and said, we have, because climate change, everything is drying out, fires is a much more volatile area. We need to insulate our jump wires, we need to insulate our hot wires, we need to go back and do the kind of line maintenance to make sure we don't have to start. And not every time you have a fire is somebody at fault. One of the guys who is one of the fire experts that we bring in, told me that he's worked on a couple of fires, 2 fires, that he traced to people playing golf. Oh, somebody swinging a golf club created a spark, and that's how the fire started. So, not all fires are the result of negligence, but some of them are. Some fires you can't do anything about. Some of them you can. And today, if you can do something about it, and you don't, it's criminal. And this is a company that has behaved in criminal ways. A pipeline explosion that they had in 2010, the federal judge found that they had criminally falsified the records, Pacific Gas and Electric, for 5 years prior to that explosion. And then they were given 5 years criminal probation. And it got extended again because of the wine country fires. Because the judge said, this is the same thing. They're not coming clean. So this is a company that knows better. That's my point. It knows better. What it did was wrong. I sued General Electric to get the PCBs out of the Hudson. GE for many years was dumping PCBs. It didn't have to. It was just cheaper to do it. And they had a bunch of people, they had 20,000 jobs in New York, and when the governor would say to them, you shouldn't be doing that, it's illegal, they'd say, don't enforce the law or we'll move across the river to New Jersey, and they'll get the tax revenue, you'll still get the PCBs. Oh, Kerry and Rockefeller said, okay, keep doing it, and they did it. And they took all those factories, they closed them down, and they left the Hudson Valley anyway. They don't have any employees in New York. They left behind a $4.3 billion cleanup bill that nobody in the Hudson Valley can afford. And I represented, when I started working, 2,000 commercial fishermen on the Hudson. We had one of the richest fisheries in North America, and the oldest, 350-year-old fishery. And now there's 2 left on the Hudson because we got a lot of fish in the river. But you can't eat most species because of the PCBs. So that is, that's what is called externalizing cost. This is a company that was internalizing its profits, but it was externalizing its costs. It was making you and I and the taxpayer pay for the damage to the Hudson. The fishermen who lost their jobs, they didn't lose it because they had a bad business model. They lost it because GE subverted democracy and cheated the free market and corrupted the politicians and captured the regulatory agencies. And that's the same thing you see with every act of pollution. You see large, big, you show me a polluter, I'll show you a subsidy. I'll show you a fat cat using political clout to escape the discipline of the free market and force the public to pay his production costs. That's exactly what Pacific Gas and Electric are doing here. They're forcing you are a collateral damage in their business model. Paradise was collateral damage in the PG&E business model. It was a corporate sacrifice that had to be made in order to make shareholder projections. They didn't want to spend the money. They'd rather not spend $20 million a year inspecting the lines. They'd rather you spend $11 billion or $40 billion or whatever it's going to cost to undo the damage that they did up there, because they thought, we'll get away with it, and we're not going to let them get away with it. So I'm going to bring up, the reason I joined is I got calls from a lot of attorneys. There's a lot of good attorneys who've been up here doing cases. I joined a team that I had worked with on Monsanto, and the people that I consider best in the state. And one of the reasons they're the best is because on this issue on fire, it's because the person I'm going to bring up here now is Diane Moore, who works with Mom Headland and has worked specifically on fire issues, and nothing but fire issues for 40 years. And she doesn't like me to say that because she thinks it dates her, but I think it's a good selling point. She's going to tell you later. Anyway, thank you for welcoming me into your community, and as always, you make me feel like I'm part of the family here, and thank you all for who you are and for your commitment to the community and the Guild. Thank you.